Why did no one look at her when the map lit up red? The briefing room was crowded, officers, pilots, intelligence techs, ground commanders, but she may as well have been standing alone. Screens flickered with satellite updates, radio logs, status feeds, and right in the center of the map, blinking steadily, stubbornly, were 250 Marines, pinned in a valley where the mountains twisted like broken ribs. No air cover. No route out. The night closing like a fist around them. But no one was looking at the map anymore. Not really. They were looking at protocols, risk reports, failure probabilities, written in numbers instead of blood. Lieutenant Commander Sandra Keene stood behind the others, helmet tucked under her arm, chin raised but eyes steady. Her hair was pulled back tight, no loose strands, and her flight suit was zipped all the way up like armor she still wasn't sure she deserved to wear anymore. They didn't call her pilot. Not these days. They called her Viper when they remembered the old days. Mostly, though, they just called her logistics, transport, the one who flew spare parts, medical supplies, MRE pallets, and water bottles. The pilot they put behind the lines because she had once failed to bring someone home. They never said that last part out loud. But silence has its own vocabulary. Colonel Hawkins stood at the command table, both hands braced on either side of the display. The overhead lights flickered with the generator's pulse, just enough to show the exhaustion buried behind his eyes. Corson Valley is a blackout kill zone, he said, voice low and even. Enemy anti-air batteries are active in every ridge crossing. The last drone we sent in was hit before it cleared altitude. We send a bird, we lose it. We send two, we lose both. His jaw clenched. We do not throw bodies into a fire we cannot put out. Someone exhaled, someone swallowed, someone looked anywhere but the map. The silence was thick, dense enough to be a decision all its own. And that was the part that hurt the most. Not that they were afraid. Fear was rational, necessary. Fear keeps pilots alive. But the quiet resignation, the acceptance that 250 young Marines would simply die tonight, that was heavier than fear. That was something colder. Captain Reeves leaned back in his chair, spinning a pen between his fingers like a casual afterthought. He didn't look toward Sandra. He didn't need to. His voice found her without turning his head. "Viper, you're still running supply shifts, right?" He smirked. "Probably better if you sit this one out. Leave the hero flights to people hooray current." The chuckles were small, quick, soft enough to pretend they weren't meant to wound. Still sharp enough to cut. Sandra didn't look at him. She didn't look at anyone. Her jaw tightened the smallest amount, that was all. Reeves kept going, thinking himself witty. "We're not airlifting crates today. We're talking anti-air, RPG nests, laser-guided SAM placement. Real flying. You remember that, right?" Colonel Hawkins snapped. "Reeves, enough." But the damage was already done. And Reeves knew it. And Sandra knew it. No one in that room knew about the photograph taped inside her cockpit. No one saw the initials tattooed on the inside of her wrist. No one heard the last words spoken into her headset 6 years ago, breath weak, static-filled. "You gotta go, Viper. You gotta let me go." She didn't argue back then. She didn't get to choose. But she was choosing now. The radio operator at the back of the tent spoke up. "Bravo Company is down to 3 hours of ammunition, maybe less." Someone whispered a curse. Someone else looked away. Hawkins' voice softened, not gentler, just tired. "We hold position until dawn. That's the call." That was it. Decision made. Lives measured. Outcome accepted. The colonel gathered his papers, chairs scraped, boots shifted, people exhaled, relieved to have an order, even a terrible one. Except her. Sandra didn't move. The map shifted slightly as a technician adjusted the satellite feed. The valley flickered, reshaping into mountains she had flown over 100 times before. There was a ravine that ran like a scar along the western cliff, a shadowed pass where wind funneled into knife-sharp currents. Every pilot avoided it. Every manual warned against it. Every training instructor said it was suicide to fly through at night. But it wasn't impossible, just unforgiving. Hawkins noticed her still standing. He paused, not angry, just knowing. "Lieutenant Commander." Sandra raised her eyes, calm, clear. "If we wait until dawn," she said quietly, "we will not have 250 Marines to recover. We'll have remains." A murmur rippled. Not disagreement. Recognition. Hawkins' voice was barely above a whisper. "And if we send another bird into that valley tonight, we'll have remains too." He wasn't wrong. But there are deaths of the body. And there are deaths of the soul. Sandra nodded, once slow, respectful. She understood. She also did not agree. She turned toward the exit. Hawkins took a step forward. "Keen, where are you going?" She paused in the doorway. To someone else, her voice might have sounded obedient. But he heard the steel inside it. "You assigned me midnight hangar watch, sir. I'm reporting to duty." Hawkins' jaw tightened. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked at her like a man trying to will a mountain not to fall. "Don't make me write your name on a report," he said softly. She didn't smile, but something in her eyes shifted, softer, sadder. "Then don't, sir." She stepped outside. The desert night embraced her like an old memory, dry wind, grit, the faint metallic tang of fuel. The flight line stretched out in dull silver under floodlights, rows of sleeping aircraft angled like waiting wolves. Her boots crunched lightly across concrete, steady steps, unhurried, but every heartbeat was a drum. Sergeant Cole, working late, spotted her as she approached her bird, Hawk 11, the one they all thought she only used for cargo. He jogged forward, brow furrowing. "Ma'am, orders say all aircraft grounded, full lock." She rested her hand against the nose panel, her fingers tracing the familiar dent from Oman, the one she refused to repair. "Fuel her," she said. Cole blinked. "Ma'am, I—" She didn't raise her voice, didn't change her tone. But when she looked at him, he understood. "All systems, full payload, arm her for hostile air." Cole swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am." There was no defiance in his obedience. Just respect. The kind forged in silence, not medals. Sandra climbed into the cockpit. The seat creaked. The instrument panel glowed faint green, reflecting softly in her eyes. Her hand hovered over the photograph taped beside the altimeter. She didn't touch it. Just looked. 2 pilots. Sunlight. Dust. Smiles too wide to believe. His arm slung over her shoulder. His name patch visible. LT James T. Walker. JTW. Gone in a valley not unlike this one. She spoke out loud, not prayer, not confession, just truth spoken into the hum of memory. "I couldn't save you." Her hand lowered to the controls. "But I can save them." The engine spun up, slow at first, then stronger, and the floodlights cast long shadows across the sand as the rotors carved the night. Voices crackled to life in her headset. "Hawk 11, power down immediately. Repeat, power down immediately." Her hand hovered over the throttle. "Copy," she said. But she didn't stop. The rotors reached flight speed. The ground trembled, dust spiraled. "Hawk 11, you are not cleared for takeoff. Shut down now. That is an order." Sandra breathed once deep, steady, and keyed her mic. "Tower Hawk 11." She paused. Her voice was soft, almost peaceful. "I know what I'm doing." The Hawkeye lifted from the ground, dust exploding outward in a halo, and surged into the night sky, vanishing toward the valley where gunfire still echoed. No one in the control tower moved for 30 seconds. Then Colonel Hawkins removed his cap. Not in anger, but in grief. And something else. Pride. He couldn't speak out loud. Why did the gunfire suddenly stop? Sergeant Mason Hale didn't trust silence. Not here. Not tonight. Not after everything they'd heard in the last 15 hours. He crouched behind a jagged rock outcrop, dust caked to his face like war paint, sweat turning the grit into something darker. Around him, the valley stretched wide and broken, ridges towering overhead like jagged teeth. Silence wasn't peace. Silence meant the enemy was repositioning. He lifted his head half an inch and scanned the ridge line through the haze. No movement, no muzzle flashes, no shouting. Just the distant crackle of small fires and the faint hum of wind through stone. "Sergeant," a voice rasped softly behind him. Private Torres, barely 20, too young for this kind of quiet. His helmet sat crooked on his head. His eyes were wide in the way someone looked after seeing things they weren't ready for. Hale didn't turn. His voice came out low, sand dry. "They're shifting positions. Reload while you've got the breathing room." Torres swallowed hard and nodded. His hands trembled as he slammed another mag into his rifle. Click. The sound was sharp in the stillness. Hale closed his eyes for half a second. They were down to their last boxes of ammo. Some squads were already rationing, single shots, nothing wasted. One round to one target, no warning bursts, no cover sprays. Every bullet now meant a heartbeat. A decision. A life or the last seconds of one. The night air was cold, the kind of cold that slips under armor and sinks into bone. But the Marines weren't shivering. They were past shivering, past hunger, past fear. They were in the stage of war where the body becomes a machine, and the soul hovers somewhere just outside the skin, watching. Hale turned and moved back toward the shallow cave they'd claimed as a makeshift aid station. The path was steep rock and loose gravel. His boots slid once. He didn't curse. He had no energy to waste on emotion. Inside, the cave glowed faint orange from a flare stuck upright in the dirt. The air was heavy with copper, the metallic smell of blood. Corpsman Ritter knelt beside a Marine lying on a bedroll, hands slick up to the wrists. He was working fast, too fast for precision, too slow for hope. "Pressure's dropping," Ritter muttered under his breath. "Come on, stay with me, Marine." The man on the ground wasn't speaking anymore. His eyes were half open, staring at nothing. Hale didn't ask his name. Names made things harder. "How long?" Hale murmured. Ritter didn't look up. His voice was tight, fraying at the edges. "I can keep him breathing maybe 10 more minutes. After that." He didn't finish. Hale just nodded. He didn't give orders for comfort. He didn't believe in lies. Across the cave, Lieutenant Avery sat with his back against the stone wall, bandage wrapped tight around his thigh. His rifle lay across his lap. His face was pale, but his eyes were clear. "What'd you see up top?" he asked, voice steady. Hale crouched beside him. "They've stopped firing. They're circling. They'll try to come in close this time, make it personal." Avery nodded once. No fear, just acceptance. "How long until dawn?" 4 hours, maybe." Avery breathed out slowly. 4 hours is a lifetime in a firefight. 4 hours is death wearing bootsteps. "They're waiting for us to run out of ammo," Avery said flatly. "Yeah," Hale replied. Both men stared forward. No panic, no despair, just the brutal honesty shared by soldiers who know exactly what's coming. After a long moment, Avery spoke again, quiet, almost gentle. "What are the odds command sends help?" Hale didn't answer. Avery gave a soft, humorless laugh. "Right, so we hold." Hale looked at him then, really looked. And in the lieutenant's eyes he saw it, the thing no one wanted to name. They all knew no help was coming. The radio crackled suddenly, the static slicing through the still air like a blade. Everyone in the cave froze, heads snapping up. Ritter stopped moving for the briefest second, hope flickering like a dying match. "Bravo Actual, this is command. Acknowledged." The voice was fractured, weak, nearly drowned by interference. Torres scrambled to adjust the frequency. "Command, repeat. We read you, we read you." Static swallowed the line. Then, "Hold position. No air support until." More static. "Dawn." Tor's voice cracked. "No, no, no, come on." Ritter slammed his fist once against the dirt. Hale closed his eyes. Avery leaned his head back against the rock wall, not in defeat, but in understanding. They had been left. Not out of cruelty, not out of incompetence. Out of math. Hale stood and stepped out of the cave and into the open night air. The sky above was moonless black, but stars cut through, a cold, glittering ocean that didn't care who lived or died beneath it. He stared upward a long moment. "Where are you?" he whispered. He didn't know who he was asking. God. Luck. Command. Fate. The answer was the same. Nothing. A sound broke the silence, a soft cough. Someone was sitting at the edge of the ridge, knees pulled up, staring into the dark. Corporal Danny Vega. One of the few women in the company. Tough, sharp-witted, the one who could make a whole platoon laugh on a day when everything else was falling apart. But now her shoulders were slumped, her face drawn, dirt streaked her cheek. She didn't look up as Hale lowered himself to sit beside her. "They're out there," she whispered. "I can hear them moving. They think we're done." Hale nodded. "They're not wrong." Vega's jaw tightened. Her voice was raw, not weak, raw. "Do you think we're going home?" Hale didn't answer right away. He thought of the men sleeping in shallow breaths. The wounded holding onto fatting warmth. The ones who were fighting to stay awake because if they slept, they wouldn't wake up again. Then he thought of the command tent he knew was miles and miles away. Bright lights, hot coffee, safe walls, professional fear. He thought of the word they all avoided saying. Expendable. He didn't lie. "No," he said quietly, "not unless something changes." Vega didn't cry. Marines don't cry when the end comes. But she blinked slowly once, twice, like she was memorizing the night sky. "Then I wish I had told my mother I loved her the last time I had signaled." Hale's breath caught. He had no answer for that. Before he could speak, a distant rumble rolled across the valley. Not thunder. Not artillery. Something mechanical. Something heavy. Something alive. Vega's head snapped up. "What is that?" Hale stood slowly, heart pounding, not with hope but disbelief. The rumble grew, louder, closer. The air vibrated, pebbles trembled across the ground. Then, cutting through the smoke, through the darkness, through the death that had settled into the valley like fog, a searchlight split the sky. White, blinding, alive. The kind of light that said, "Get up. Keep breathing. Not today." Tor stumbled out of the cave, mouth falling open. "Is that no way? That can't." Avery limped toward the ridge, one hand gripping the rock to steady himself. His voice was a whisper. "It's a bird." Ritter stepped out next, disbelief turning into something else, something trembling, fragile, dangerous. "Hope." Hale stared upward. There, descending through tracer fire like it was simply weather. Hawk 11. Flying low. Flying fast. Flying into hell, not away from it. Vega whispered the name like a prayer. "Viper." The valley erupted again, but this time not in despair. In defiance. Voices rose, not shouts of panic, shouts of warning, of movement, of readiness. Weapons lifted. Positions reset. Hearts forced to beat again. Sergeant Hale lifted his rifle, breath steady, hands sure. "Everyone stand the hell up," he said, voice low, trembling not with fear, but with something deeper. "She didn't come for bodies." He raised his voice, loud enough to reach every Marine in the valley. "She came for the living." Behind him, the gunfire returned, hot and sharp and furious from the enemy lines. But now the Marines weren't waiting for death. They were holding ground. They had something to hold it for. And above them, her rotors slicing through smoke, her searchlight cutting through the dark, her bird flying crooked and fearless. Sandra Keene flew alone into a war that everyone else had already surrendered. Not for glory, not to be remembered, not to erase her ghosts, but because somewhere in the desert, 250 Marines were still breathing. And breathing meant there was still a chance. What memory does a pilot fear the most? Not the sound of gunfire, not the engine alarms, not the sudden lurch of metal tearing open mid-flight. No, the memory she feared was silence. The kind that comes after you call someone's name, and there is no answer. Sandra's hands tightened around the cyclic as Hawk 11 cut low through the Corson Valley, rotors beating the night into a storm around her. The signal jammer interference crackled across her headset, drowning everything in static and distant echoes. But underneath the noise, another sound lived, one she had tried for years to forget. The sound of a voice fatting. "Altitude steady," she murmured to herself, making small adjustments against unpredictable canyon winds. "Keep the nose down. Don't climb. Don't give them a clean lock." Her co-pilot wasn't there. The seat beside her was empty. She was flying alone tonight. But in her mind, there was someone there. A voice. Warm. Steady. Laughing sometimes. Calling her Viper, with a grin because she never flinched first. "LT James T. Walker." Call sign, Whisper. The only pilot who could fly closer to death and make the sky look quiet. She remembered that night, just as clearly as she remembered her own name. It hadn't been dark like this. The sky had been a blazing orange, sunset bleeding across Oman like spilled oil. The air was hot enough to scorch through gloves, sandstorms on the horizon, the kind of evening where everything felt stretched thin, light, heat, breath, patience. They were flying a two-bird convoy, routine evac, not combat, not supposed to be anyway. They were picking up 3 wounded recon soldiers pinned behind a collapsed ridge. The extraction window was tight, but the ridge provided partial cover. The enemy was supposed to be scattered, uncoordinated, disorganized. Supposed to be. Sandra had been at the controls then, Hawk 11, the same bird she flew now. JTW sat beside her, leaning slightly forward, hand hovering near the engine throttle like he always did when he was thinking more than he was speaking. "You're flying tense," he had said quietly. "I'm flying precise," she'd replied. He'd smiled, that small half-curved smile that hinted at things he didn't say aloud. "That's your word for it." She didn't answer. He glanced out through the canopy, storms coming faster than forecast. She nodded, "We'll be out before it hits." "You sure?" he murmured. "Always," she said. Confidence wasn't bravado to her. Confidence was necessity. If you let uncertainty in, it grew teeth. They descended behind the ridge. The dust storm sat heavy along the horizon like a wall of sand waiting for its cue to fall. The recon team was already waving smoke markers. The landing was clean, precise. The wounded were loaded fast. No chaos, no panic, no heightened voices. Then the radio crackled. Bird 2 taking fire, North Ridge, there's movement. Gunfire erupted across the canyon like shattering glass. Muzzle flashes burst along the ridge line. Too many, too close, too coordinated. Not scattered at all. Not unprepared. A trap. Lift, 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 JTW shouted, pushing the throttle as Sandra pulled pitch. The bird surged upward, rotors kicking sand into a cyclone around them. Bullets pinged against the plating, sharp, angry, sparking along metal. The recon soldiers inside swore and braced against the walls. "We've got a Stinger signal, bearing 14, JTW snapped. Sandra threw the Hawk into a hard bank. Gravity slammed them sideways. Someone inside fell, someone cursed, someone prayed. The missile streaked past their tail, exploding harmlessly against rock. Then a second signal. Then a third. "Too many," she muttered. "Yeah," he breathed, "way too many." He didn't sound afraid. He sounded focused, the way he always did when death was close enough to taste. They cleared the ridge and leveled out, but the storm struck early. Sand swallowed the sky in a red-brown roar. Visibility dropped to nothing. The horizon, the ground, the stars gone. In the cockpit, it felt like flying inside smoke. No GPS. No visual reference. Only instinct. And Sandra had enough instinct to save them. They were going to make it. They were. Until the fourth signal hit. No alert tone. No warning. Just impact. The explosion tore through the side plating like a fist breaking ribs. The cockpit filled with fire and metal. The bird lurched sideways. Sandra held the controls, but the force threw JTW forward against his harness. He didn't scream. He just made a short sound, choked, surprised, like someone who had just been punched hard in the chest. "Sandra," he gasped. She didn't look at him, couldn't. If she looked, she would break. And if she broke, they all died. "Hold on," she said, voice steady. I've got us, just stay with me." She forced the bird into a glide, using the burning engine's failing momentum to carry them far enough to clear the canyon floor. Sparks rained through the cockpit. Smoke filled her lungs. She couldn't see him, but she could hear his breathing. Shallow. Wet. Wrong. "Talk to me," she ordered. He was silent. "James." His voice finally came, thin, frayed, cracking apart like dry wood. "Don't look at me." She looked anyway. His harness was soaked red. Shrapnel across his torso. Breathing ragged and fatting in spirals. Her throat closed around his name. "Stay with me," she whispered. He tried to smile. Tried to be the same quiet calm he always was. But pain had a way of making truth bare. "Viper, you have to fly the bird." That was the moment she broke. Not out loud. Not in action. But inside, deep, where no one could see. Because she already knew what he wasn't saying. If they landed now, everyone survived. Everyone except him. He knew. She knew. They both knew. And still, she fought for something impossible. "We're landing, and I'm patching you up." "Viper." "I said I'm patching you up." His hand lifted, trembling, finding hers on the controls. Not stopping her. Not guiding her. Just touching her. Like farewell. His voice was soft. Barely breath. "You gotta go." Her breath shattered. "No. You gotta let me go." She shook her head hard, eyes burning through the smoke. "We are not leaving you." He exhaled, slow, final, everything in it. "You already know." They hit ground 1 minute later, hard but survivable. Troops dragged wounded out. The storm howled. Sand swallowed the sky. She stayed with him. She kept him breathing. She kept talking. She kept saying his name. But sometimes love does not outrun the body. Sometimes the heartbeat stops. And the cockpit went quiet. Not peaceful quiet. The quiet where part of you stays in the past and refuses to follow the rest of you forward. The memory dissolved. The present returned. Sandra blinked once, slow, breath steady as Hawk 11 cut through tracer fire in Corson Valley. The storm was different. The mountain shapes different. The faces she was flying toward different. But the silence was the same. The silence was the reason she flew now. Not to rewrite the past. Not to erase failure. Not to be forgiven. But because the dead teach you something the living never can. If there is breath left, there is a chance. If there is a chance, you take it. Even if it costs you everything. Her hand tightened around the cyclic. Almost there, she whispered. Whether to the aircraft, the Marines, or the ghost beside her, she didn't know. The valley opened beneath her. Firelight, shadows, moving shapes, muzzle flashes. This time, she was not losing anyone. Not one. How close can a bird come to death and still keep flying? Sandra didn't ask the question. Pilots don't ask questions like that. They feel the answer in the bones of the aircraft, in the vibration of the controls, in the way the engine breathes like a living thing under their fingertips. Hawk 11 was breathing hard. Smoke trailed from the right engine in thin ribbons. The fuselage vibrated unevenly. The blades hummed just a little off pitch. Any other pilot would have pulled back, gained altitude, looked for a safer approach. But altitude was exposure. Exposure was death. Up meant sky. Sky meant missile lock. She kept the bird skimming low, just above the rocky floor of the valley, so close she could feel the heat of burning debris sliding beneath her in the darkness. The Marines below were already moving, already shouting, already firing. They had no plan, no formation, no hope of holding this valley. But now they had time. Not much time. But time matters when death arrives in seconds. Sandra keyed the radio, voice steady through the static. Bravo Company, I am inbound. You have 60 seconds to clear the landing zone. I repeat, 60 seconds. Pop smoke and mark center. Her voice was not loud. It did not shake. It carried authority because it did not need to rise to be heard. Sergeant Hale responded, his voice ragged and breathless. Viper, this zone is hot. Repeat, this zone is. I know, she interrupted. A beat. But it's the only place I can land. There was no hesitation. Hale didn't argue. The kind of men who survive war recognize inevitability. Pop smoke, he bellowed to the Marines. A flare shot up, hiss, trailing red smoke into the darkness. But red smoke wasn't a signal for allies alone. Red meant location. Red meant target. The enemy saw it too. Rifle fire intensified immediately. Shouting echoed off stone. Footsteps scrambled, muzzle flashes flared along the upper ridge. Sandra's jaw clenched. Her knuckles whitened on the cyclic. Come on, she whispered to the rotors. Hold together. She descended 10 feet 8-6. Tracer fire streaked past the cockpit like burning stars. The windshield flickered with impact sparks, not penetrations, not yet. A burst of machine gun fire ripped up from the ridge behind her. The rounds hit the tail boom, clack, 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 violent, jarring. Warnings lit up the panel. Tail rotor integrity, COMPROMICD. Stability control, red line. Hydraulic pressure, uneven. Her heartbeat did not change. Almost there, girl, she murmured. Stay with me, stay. The landing skids hovered just above the dirt. 5 feet. 4. 3. Then a flash of white light from the upper ridge, bright, sharp, unmistakable. A laser lock. Missile guidance. She saw it a split second before the alarm screamed. She didn't think. Didn't decide. She reacted. Sandra slammed the cyclic hard to the left. The Hawk rolled sideways, almost too far, rotors shaving the air inches above the rock face. The Marines on the ground threw themselves flat as the bird slid sideways in a controlled dip, dust exploding outward in a storm. Then, the missile hit the ground where she had been. A deafening blast. The shockwave punched the helicopter sideways. Metal screamed. Glass fractured. The right landing skid snapped. Hawk 11 hit the ground in a violent half-roll, slamming onto her left side before clawing upright again with brute engine force. She tasted blood, metallic and warm, where she'd bitten her tongue. The co-pilot's seat was empty. There was no one to stabilize her balance. No one to call altitude. No one to shout warnings. Just her. Her hands. Her training. Her will. And the memory of the man who had once sat beside her. Not this time. She fought the controls, muscles burning, jaw locked, body braced. The helicopter steadied. Barely. But it steadied. The Marines didn't waste a second. "Gio, move, move," Hale shouted, dragging the nearest wounded man toward the ramp. Torres and Vega hauled another Marine whose leg was wrapped in a tourniquet so tight it had turned his foot white. Avery hobbled forward, one arm clamped around Ritter's shoulders, blood dripping from his thigh. Bullets pinged off the hull in a constant metallic storm. One round struck the armored glass at Sandra's left shoulder, cracking it into a spiderweb. She didn't blink. She kept the nose pointed toward the ridge, cannon angled just enough to suppress fire without burning through her last ammunition. 20 seconds, she shouted into the mic. Inside the cargo bay, the Marines shoved, lifted, dragged each other inside. No one let go of anyone. No one. A moment like that is not heroism. It is instinct. It is loyalty carved into bone. Sandra felt the bird dipping, the right engine coughing hard, smoke thickening inside the cockpit. Come on, don't stall, don't you dare. The rotor began to lose speed. She slammed the fuel override, forcing the engine to burn hotter, harder, faster. She could feel the aircraft screaming under her. 10 seconds, Hale yelled. Vega sprinted toward the ramp carrying a Marine who wasn't moving. Sandra's breath caught. Not the man. The way Vega's hands were shaking. Not fear. Exhaustion so deep it had become indistinguishable. Vega stumbled. Hale turned, ran back, grabbed her by the vest, hauled both bodies inside. Close it, Sandra shouted. The crew chief slammed the hatch shut. Hale hit the wall with his fist, signaling ready. Sandra lifted the collective. Nothing happened. The rotors spun, but the bird didn't rise. They were too heavy. The engine too damaged. The air too thin. She whispered it, barely sound at all. Fly. The aircraft groaned. Come on, she breathed again. I'm still here. Hawk 11 shuddered. Lifted 1 inch. Fell back. She tasted fear, but refused to feel it. Not today. Sandra pulled back harder, arms shaking with effort, muscles burning from shoulder to wrist. The helicopter lurched upward, slow, like a wounded animal trying to stand. Bullets streaked across the rear fuselage. Something sparked, something hissed. The tail rotor coughed. If the tail failed, the bird would spin. If it spun, they would crash. If they crashed. No. Not today. They rose 3 feet 4 or 5. Then, a figure burst from behind a broken wall near the ridge, RPG launcher on his shoulder, aim locked on the Hawk. Sandra saw him. Hale saw him. Vega saw him. Time didn't slow. It sharpened. Hale raised his rifle. One shot. Single, clean, inevitable. The enemy fell. The RPG fired anyway. The rocket arced wild, unguided spiraling. Sandra wrenched the cyclic. The rocket missed by inches. Inches. The bird climbed. 6 feet 10, 20. Out of the kill zone. The valley dropped away beneath them. Gunfire thundered under their skids, and then nothing. Just wind. Just the sound of engines barely holding on. Just breathing. Inside the cabin, Marines lay against each other, not speaking, not celebrating, not crying. Just alive. Hale leaned his head back against the wall, chest rising in slow, heavy breaths. Vega's hands were still shaking. Torres stared upward like the sky was a miracle. Avery closed his eyes, lips moving silently, not prayer, just thanks. Sandra did not look back. Her eyes stayed forward. On the horizon. On the long way home. Her shoulder throbbed where shrapnel had cut deep. Her tongue still tasted blood. Her hands trembled, but the controls did not. She did not smile. She did not exhale. She simply whispered, "Hold together just a little longer." The hawk climbed. Trails of fire behind her. Metal groaning. Systems failing. But still flying. Because she was not finished yet. And neither were the men she carried. How quiet can a battlefield become? The valley fell behind them, shrinking into a bowl of smoke and moving shadows. Gunfire echoed in fatting bursts, distant now, like a memory already separating itself from the present. Inside the helicopter, no one spoke. Silence was not peace. Silence was survival. Sandra kept her eyes forward, fingers locked around the cyclic. Her shoulder burned where shrapnel had torn clean through the fabric. Blood had dried against her sleeve, sticky, dark, almost black in the cockpit light. Her heartbeat was steady, but slow, too slow, a dangerous slow. Her breathing didn't match the urgency of the moment. That was the first sign of shock. She ignored it. The instrument panel flickered in dim, uneven pulses. Half the gauges were red. Half the warning lights had gone dark entirely, which was somehow worse. The artificial horizon was unreliable. The engine pressure alarm was half a beat off. The tail rotor response lagged by fractions of seconds. Sandra didn't fly with instruments now. She flew with the machine's weight against her hands. Feel, not think. She eased the collective up by millimeters, adjusting for the bird's stubborn pull to the right. The helicopter listed slightly, fighting her, but still listening. Barely. Her voice was low, barely a whisper. Just keep breathing. It wasn't clear if she meant herself or the aircraft. In the cargo hold, the Marines lay or crouched against the walls, exhausted bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder. Helmets off, heads down. The air was thick with sweat and smoke, diesel and iron, blood and dust. Sergeant Hale sat with his back against a panel, rifle across his knees, eyes half-lidded. Not asleep. No one could sleep right now. He was simply conserving everything, breath, thought, fear. Vega sat beside him, knees pulled up, hands loose around her helmet. Her fingers still trembled, but her breathing had slowed. Controlled. She stared at nothing and everything at the same time. Across from her, Corpsman Ritter worked in quiet urgency. He leaned over a Marine whose uniform was torn open, bandages layered thick across his ribs. No exit wound, Ritter muttered to himself. Bullet still in, but if it didn't hit the lung, he can make it. He can make it. His voice cracked, not in fear but hope. Hope was more fragile than bone. Lieutenant Avery sat near the ramp, one leg stretched awkwardly, hand pressing against the bandage on his thigh. Blood had seeped through, dried dark. His jaw was clenched not from pain but from calculation. He counted breaths, his own and the men around him. How many made it? How many didn't? How many would survive the next 40 minutes? Torres sat alone, staring at the deck under his boots. He looked like a child wearing a uniform several sizes too heavy for him. His lips moved, not words, just breath. Hale finally spoke, voice rough like gravel scraped across concrete. "We ain't out yet." No one disagreed. Vega didn't look up. "What's the fuel?" Avery lifted his head, eyes opening. Ritter paused. They all waited for the answer. Sandra didn't respond. The silence was answer enough. Hale swore under his breath. "Of course." Sandra's vision wavered for 1 second, a brief dimming at the edges, like a curtain nearly falling. She blinked hard, once, twice. The helicopter steadied. Her fingers flexed on the controls. She forced blood back into her grip. Pain flared down her arm, sharp enough that her breath caught. "Good." Pain meant alive. She keyed the mic. "Bravo, hold how many ambulatory?" Her voice was thin, dry. She tried again, clearer. "How many can walk after landing?" Hale answered. "Counting 5 ambulatory, 3 stretcher priority. Rest are wounded but stable. Will need evac support on touchdown." She exhaled a measured breath. "Numbers." "Facts." No emotion. "Copy." The radio crackled again, static first, then a fractured, barely their voice. "Hawk 11, this is Kandahar Command, respond." Sandra didn't answer. The signal was weak, fatting. She could call back, but if she opened the channel fully, enemy signal tracking could lock onto her location. She couldn't risk it. Hale watched her from the cabin through the cockpit open frame. He could see the tension in her shoulders, the stillness in her posture, the fight she was holding entirely inside. He whispered, not to her but to himself. "She's flying hurt." Vega heard it. So did Avery. "Will she make it?" Torres whispered. Avery didn't answer immediately. He didn't know how to lie well. "She'll get us as far as she can." Hale looked at him. "As far as she can better be home." Avery didn't nod, didn't look away. "It will be, if we stay quiet, if we stay calm, if we don't break before she does." They all understood what that meant. If she lost consciousness, if her hand slipped even once, the valley might as well have never been escaped at all. Sandra watched the horizon. The desert stretched out ahead in rolling waves of darkness. No lights, no structures, no points of reference. Only memory. She'd flown this route 100 times. In daylight. In storms. In grief. The mind remembers shapes even when the eyes don't. Her shoulder pulsed again, sharp, rhythmic. Her fingers went numb halfway to the knuckles. She shifted her grip, subtle, practiced. The helicopter dipped. Just slightly. Vega sucked in a breath. Hale's eyes snapped up. Ritter froze mid-bandage. Avery clenched his jaw. Sandra corrected the dip, smooth, clean, like it never happened. No one spoke. But the fear moved through the cabin like a cold wind. The desert wind shifted. Not a storm. Not a warning. Just change. Something old pilots feel before they understand. Sandra whispered to the cockpit, soft, tired, intimate. "Don't give up on me, not yet." Her voice broke not in sound but in weight. The aircraft did not answer. But the rotors held. The engine coughed, once then steadied. The Hawk flew on. Minutes passed. Or maybe hours. Time loses shape when survival is measured in heartbeats. Sandra's breathing grew shallow. Her arm felt heavy. The cyclic seemed heavier than metal should be. Her eyes blurred for a fraction of a second. She blinked hard. Harder. The horizon remained steady. She forced her voice to work. All personnel, prepare for low approach landing upon visual. Hale answered quietly. We're ready. Vega wiped her eyes with the back of her glove. Ritter tied off another bandage. Torres gripped his rifle like prayer beads. Avery stared straight forward, jaw locked. The bird flew. The night stretched. The stars watched. And slowly, like dawn remembering its promise, a faint string of lights shimmered on the horizon. Hale saw them first. His breath caught, not in relief, because relief was too fragile to claim yet, but in recognition. Home, Vega whispered. Avery closed his eyes, just for a moment. Torres let out a sound that was part laugh, part sob, part disbelief. Ritter exhaled a shaking breath. Sandra didn't react. She couldn't afford to. Her body was seconds away from the edge. Her pulse slowing. Her hand weakening. Her vision narrowing into tunnels of color and shadow. She flew through it. Not by strength. Not by training. By will. Hawk 11 descended, slow, steady, aching, but alive. Sandra's lips parted, not to speak, to breathe. Just once. She whispered to the ghost sitting beside her, an empty seat still full. Don't leave me yet. Whether she meant him or herself was unclear. The bird continued toward the runway, its wounded engine struggling but refusing to die. They were almost home. Almost. And sometimes, almost is the most dangerous distance in the world. How close can a person come to blacking out before they lose the sky? Sandra didn't know the exact moment her hands began to feel distant, like they belonged to someone else. The edges of her vision dimmed, not like darkness, but like fog creeping inward. She forced a breath. In. Hold. Out. The runway lights were finally in view. A thin chain of white sparks stretching across the desert floor like a promise just barely within reach. Her body wanted to collapse into that promise. Her mind refused to allow it. Almost there, she whispered. Her voice didn't sound like her own. It was thin, tired, falling apart quietly. The cockpit blurred for half a second. She blinked hard. The helicopter dipped. In the rear hold, Hale felt the change instantly. He didn't look at the instruments. He didn't need to. He felt the shift through the deck plates beneath his boots. He leaned forward, Viper. No answer. Avery looked up from where he sat bracing his wounded leg. Is she? Vega shook her head once, sharp, terrified. She's still flying, don't distract her. But Hale wasn't convinced. He pushed himself up, grabbing the overhead rail to steady his weight as the bird tilted slightly left. The rotors coughed. The tail rotor whined, grinding like metal biting metal. Engine 2's failing, Hale muttered, voice low. We're losing thrust on the right side. Ritter looked up from where he was pressing gauze to a wounded Marine's chest. If she drops the collective. We spin out, Avery finished quietly. Vega closed her eyes, jaw clenched. No prayer. Just bracing. Sandra heard them. Every word. Their voices felt far away, like voices underwater. Muffled. Slowed. Echoed through memory rather than air. She tightened her grip on the cyclic, but her hand didn't respond fast enough. The bird dipped again, sharper this time. Alarms blared across the panel. Hydraulic failure. Engine temp critical. Tail rotor imbalance. Pilot vital signs unstable. She didn't need the last one. She could feel it. Her pulse was slow. Too slow. Her body conserving what little blood was left. She opened her mouth to call the base tower, but her throat didn't work at first. She swallowed. Tried again. Kandahar Tower, Hawk 11, inbound final bird is unstable, emergency status. Static. Then frantic voices overlapping. Hawk 11, we read you. Medical teams are en route. Fire crew positioned at landing corridor. She cut them off with 2 words. Do not rush me. Her tone was quiet. The kind of quiet that clears rooms. The radio went dead. Not from malfunction. From respect. The skids were still 30 feet above the desert floor when the right engine finally gave up. It didn't die at once. It stuttered, a coughing rattle like lungs failing. The helicopter lurched sideways. Hale didn't think. He moved. He staggered forward, grabbing the cockpit frame. Viper, talk to me. Sandra's eyes were locked ahead, pupils blown wide, her breaths coming thin and shallow. Her voice was barely sound. Hold the bird steady. Her left hand tightened, but her right slipped. The helicopter veered. Hale didn't hesitate. He climbed into the cockpit, bracing himself beside her, gripping the secondary controls. He wasn't trained to fly this bird. Not really. Not well. But Marines don't always choose the fights they're handed. He steadied the control stick with her. She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. Her voice was a whisper. Don't fight me, just follow. He nodded. Jaw locked. Eyes forward. Avery shouted from the cargo bay. Ritter, get ready, she's going to crash it in. Ritter strapped down the wounded. Torres grabbed hold of the webbing. Vega wrapped her arm around the nearest Marine, holding him upright. The helicopter sank lower. 20 feet. 15. 10. The desert wind kicked up sand, blasting the cockpit windows with grit. Sandra's breath hitched. Her vision flickered again. Not now. Not yet. She forced her voice through numb lips. Counter left, tail compensation. Hale followed her motion by feel, not understanding, just trusting. Trust is a battlefield currency. The rarest one. The bird leveled. But the landing zone wasn't clear. Medical crew. Fuel trucks. Ground personnel. Too many people. If she landed there, the crash would take them all. She dragged the cyclic, jerking the bird sideways toward the far end of the runway, the emergency sand berms. Hale realized it before anyone else. We're not landing on the pad. Sandra's voice came weak. No time. The belly of the bird scraped the sand. Sparks flew. The helicopter bounced, once hard, the impact ripping through her injured shoulder. She gasped, a sound she didn't mean to make. Her vision whited out. Hale grabbed the controls, holding them steady, shouting, I've got it, I've got it. He didn't. Not really. But Sandra came back in a surge of breath and pain, gripping the cyclic again, her hands trembling. Together. Not fluid. Not graceful. But alive. They guided Hawk 11 into a sliding, grinding landing along the sand berms. Metal screamed. Sparks showered. The tail rotor snapped and spun off into the night. The bird slammed to a stop. Silence hid. Not soft. Not gentle. The silence of something that should not have survived, and yet still did. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Vega whispered, voice cracking open. Holy hell. Torres let out a sob he tried to swallow. Ritter's hands slumped over the Marine he was tending, exhaustion overtaking adrenaline. Avery exhaled, long shaking, disbelieving. Hale kept his hand on the controls, even after they'd gone still. He looked at Sandra. She was still upright, still breathing. Barely. Her eyes blinked once. Then again. Then closed. Her head tipped forward. Hale caught her before she fell. "Viper, hey, stay with me." No response. Her pulse fluttered beneath his fingers, weak, uneven, distant. He didn't shout for help. He didn't panic. He just said it, soft, steady, the way she had spoken to the bird. "Hold together, just a little longer." Outside, the base floodlights bathed Hawk 11 in soft gold. Figures ran toward them. Medics, command staff, the colonel. But inside the cockpit, there was only the sound of breathing. One fatting, one steadying it, and a helicopter that should not be alive, but was, because she refused to let it die. How does a battlefield end? Not with cheering, not with speeches, not with music swelling under the sky. It ends with breathing, and the fear it might stop. The desert wind settled around Hawk 11, carrying dust that glowed softly in the floodlights. The helicopter was silent now, engines dead, rotors motionless. Smoke drifted upward in slow curls, glowing orange and gold in the sunrise. Boots pounded across the tarmac. Voices called orders, not frantic but controlled. Medics, fire crew, base personnel, command staff. Too many people who had not been here when the world was falling apart, now arriving when the danger was gone. Sergeant Hale didn't look at any of them. He was still in the cockpit, one arm around Sandra's back, the other hand curled under her wrist, fingers pressing to her pulse. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't blink. Her pulse was there. Faint, unsteady, but there. Vega climbed out first, one hand gripping the rail for balance. Her legs shook beneath her, not from injury, but from relief so sharp it hurt. She blinked hard, breathing ragged, eyes burning with the kind of exhaustion that didn't fade after sleep. Ritter came next, guiding stretchers forward as medics swarmed inside. His voice had lost its urgency, not because the emergency was over, but because urgency had been replaced by something deeper. The quiet, focused care of someone who knew lives were finally safe to save. Torres walked out last, shoulders slumped, helmet hanging from one hand. His eyes were red, jaw tight, like he was trying to hold onto something that still felt too big to understand. Lieutenant Avery braced a hand on the frame as he stepped down, one leg still wrapped in quickly improvised medical gauze. He steadied himself. One breath, then another. His gaze didn't go to the medics, or the ambulances, or the base crew gathering in stunned silence. He looked only at the cockpit. At her. Alive. Not a miracle. Not luck. Something harder than both. A debt the world could never repay. Colonel Hawkins reached the helicopter just as the first stretcher was lowered. His cap was still in his hand, not from formality, but because he had forgotten how to put it on. He stopped 5 feet away. Not from hesitation. Not from shock. From respect. A sound rose in his chest, a breath that wasn't steady, but he swallowed it. Officers didn't break in front of enlisted. Not here, not now. But his eyes, God help him, his eyes told every story. Fear. Relief. Regret. Something like prayer. He stepped forward and placed a hand on Hale's shoulder. How is she? His voice was quiet, too quiet. Hale didn't look up. She's alive. Hawkins closed his eyes, just once, brief. Will she stay that way? Hale didn't answer. Because he didn't know. A medic climbed into the cockpit, reaching for Sandra. Hale didn't move. The medic hesitated. Sergeant, I need space. No, Hale's voice was not loud, not angry, just final. I'll carry her. The medic nodded, not out of permission but recognition. Some duties are not assigned. They are earned. Hale slid his arms under Sandra's shoulders and knees, slow, careful, and lifted her from the seat. She was lighter than he expected. Weight is strange after war. Some things weigh more in memory than bone. Her head fell against his collar. Her hair smelled like fuel, smoke, and dust. Her dog tag slid against his chest, cold metal on warm skin. He stepped down from the bird. The base fell silent. No cheering. No applause. No sound at all. Hale carried her through the corridor of floodlights, Marines and pilots and crew parting like a tide opening passage. Vega followed him. Then Ritter. Then Torres. Then Avery, limping but upright. The wounded were taken next, but the quiet stayed. Not reverent. Not ceremonial. Human. Inside the field infirmary, the lights were bright, harsh, white. The air smelled of antiseptic and gauze. Nurses moved quickly. Monitors beeped softly. Some of the wounded moaned or gasped when touched. Others didn't make sound at all. Hale laid Sandra down on the nearest bed. Ritter stepped forward immediately, hand already reaching for saline, gauze, clamps. Hale didn't step back. Ritter looked up. Hale looked down. Neither moved. The unspoken message was simple. If you work on her, I'm here. If she wakes, I'm the first face she sees. Ritter nodded once and started. IV lines, oxygen, pressure bandage, blood typing. Slow, methodical, as precise as war medicine could be. Hale watched every motion. Vega stood beside him, shoulders touching his. She'll make it, Vega whispered. Hale didn't reply. She'll make it, Vega repeated louder this time. Not hope, command. Avery sat heavily on the cot opposite, exhaling a long breath. She didn't fly to survive, he murmured. She flew to bring us home. Hale didn't answer. His jaw clenched. Yes, she had. That was the part that hurt. Not the danger. Not the blood. Not the defiance. The choice. She had chosen them over herself. Without hesitation. Without fear. And something like guilt crept behind Hale's ribs, not because he lived, but because she hadn't let herself live for her own sake. Colonel Hawkins entered quietly. He didn't speak. Didn't clear his throat. Didn't command the room. He walked to the foot of her bed and stopped. His voice was soft enough that only those closest heard it. I told her not to go, he said. Avery looked up at him. No, sir, he corrected. You told everyone not to go. Vega's chin lifted. She wasn't everyone. Hawkins' eyes glistened, just barely. He swallowed something hard. Outside the infirmary, boots gathered, dozens, maybe more. No formation. No orders. Just presence. People waiting. Not to see the wounded. To witness something rare. Courage with no audience. Sandra's chest rose. Then fell. Then rose again. Steady enough to believe in. Hale exhaled a breath he had been holding for too long. Vega wiped her eyes with the heel of her palm. Avery leaned back against the wall, breathing deep. Hawkins lowered his head. Not a bow. A salute without raising a hand. Respect unspoken. The narrator's voice would come quiet. Steady. Hollow where grief and pride meet. Sometimes the greatest battles are not fought in the sky, or the valleys, or the trenches. Sometimes they are fought in the silence after. Where no bullets fly. Where no orders shout. Where the only sound is the slow, stubborn beat of a tired heart refusing to stop. And sometimes, dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. How does a person return to themselves? Slowly, like light rising under a closed eyelid. Like a memory remembering that it still exists. Sandra's first awareness was sound. Not alarms. Not engines. Not gunfire. Breathing. Not her own. Someone else. Slow, steady, familiar. She didn't open her eyes yet. The air smelled clean. Sterile. Too still. A hospital tent. Her fingers twitched. Pain flared through her shoulder, down her ribs, across her back. But pain meant alive. Alive meant unfinished. She opened her eyes. The ceiling above her was canvas, soft tan cloth, lit gently from outside by morning sun. The world looked washed, quiet, still holding its breath. A shadow sat at her side. Hale. Not asleep. Not reading. Just there. As if he hadn't moved since he carried her in. His uniform jacket was off, sleeves rolled, forearms crossed loosely. His gaze was fixed downward on her, but not in worry. In relief. The moment her eyes opened, he exhaled. Not dramatic. Not shaky. Simply letting go of something he had been holding for too long. "You're awake," he said. His voice sounded rough, worn, used up. She tried to speak, and nothing came out. Her throat was sand and smoke. He reached for a cup of water and held the straw to her lips, steady, careful. She drank. Slow. Measured. Every swallow, grounding her more in the present. After a moment, her voice returned, faint, cracked at the edges. "Everyone made it." Hale nodded. "Yeah." Her chest rose slowly, fell slowly. "And the wounded?" "Stable," he answered. "Ritter been on them all night. He wouldn't sleep until he knew." Her eyes softened. A small, quiet thank you spoken without sound. Hale wasn't finished. "You saved 23 men. A beat. And 3 who wouldn't have survived another hour." Sandra's eyes closed. Not from pride. From the weight of the truth. Hale leaned forward, forearms resting on his knees. "You disobeyed orders." She didn't respond. "You knew the risks." She still didn't respond. "You went anyway." Silence stretched, not heavy, not tense, full. Finally, she looked at him. There were Marines on the ground. Hale breathed out, a sound like laughter without joy. "Yeah," he said, "I know." Outside the tent, voices murmured. Footsteps passed. The base was awake again. But there was something different now, something quieter. Something like reverence. Word had spread. As stories do. A pilot flew into a killbox valley. A pilot landed a dying helicopter under fire. A pilot lifted 24 men out of a place no one survives. A pilot brought them home on one engine and willpower. But stories are simple. The truth was not. Sandra didn't feel like a legend. She barely felt like a person. Her hands trembled. Her shoulder burned. Her body felt like a borrowed thing she hadn't fully returned to yet. But she was alive. Alive enough to feel the cost. The tent flap opened. The light changed. A figure stepped inside, slow, measured. Colonel Hawkins. He stopped at the foot of her bed. No clipboard. No report. No reprimand. He simply stood there, hands clasped behind his back, jaw tight enough to tremble. Sandra watched him. Waited. It took him 15 seconds to find words that didn't break him. "You did something I ordered you not to do." Her breath tightened. He swallowed. "And I will spend the rest of my life grateful that you didn't listen." Her eyes widened, not in surprise, in relief so deep it hurt. The colonel continued, voice gravel soft. "There are rules we build to keep our people alive. I believe in those rules. I have to." He paused. "But sometimes Survival is not built on rules. Hale looked down, letting the words land. Hawkins' gaze did not waver. You did what was right, and because of that 23 men will grow old, they'll marry, they'll raise their children, they'll live because of you. Sandra's throat tightened. He stepped back just one step and saluted her. Not the quick, sharp salute of protocol. The slow one. The old one. The one reserved for warriors who have earned respect beyond rank. Sandra didn't move at first. Then, with pain shooting through her arm and exhaustion weighing on her chest, she raised her hand and returned it. The colonel lowered his. But the respect stayed. He left the tent without another word. A long time passed before either she or Hale spoke again. Finally, Sandra whispered, "Is Reeves here?" Hale nodded. He came as soon as he heard. Her chest tightened. "Can I see him?" Hale stood. "You don't have to talk," he said. "You don't have to say anything, he just wants to be here." He stepped outside. A moment later, Reeves entered. The copilot seat beside her. The empty seat in the sky. The part of the story she hadn't allowed herself to touch. He stopped when he saw her. Not from shock. Not from pity. From grief. The kind that comes from watching someone you love risk everything, and knowing there was no other choice they could have made. He didn't speak. He just sat beside her and took her hand, gently, carefully, like something sacred. She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. Her voice was a whisper. "You should have been there." He squeezed her hand, not hard, just steady. "No," he said. "You needed to come home without me once, so I knew you could." Her breath hitched, a small sound, vulnerable and human. He leaned his forehead to hers. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. Not admiration. Not praise. Truth. She closed her eyes. And for the first time since the desert valley, she let herself rest. The narrator's voice returns, low, quiet, final. No medal can carry the weight of what she chose. No citation can write the cost of what she gave. No story can fully explain the courage of a person who decides, "If there is a life I can save, I will go. And if I must go alone, I will still go." Sometimes the world asks too much of the ones who can answer. And sometimes they answer anyway. Because dignity does not speak. It simply acts.